Greg Masters, day 2 at the WLSA Convergence Summit 2014 in San Diego, California. And it's my honor to speak with Don Jones, who is, among many things, digital health evangelist, the chief digital officer at Scripps Translational Science Institute, and a co-founder of WLSA. Welcome, Don.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you.
So this is an exciting time in the space. What'd you talk about yesterday when you opened the session?
You know, we had a really interesting opening session. We had Lee Hood here, who's a national treasure. Anybody who doesn't know Lee Hood should go look him up on Google and see what he's all about. He talked about P4 medicine, which is preventative and participative, as well as many other things, and he made that very relevant to the digital audience, as well as announcing his 100,000 person clinical trial coming up. And we followed that along a theme of mobility and connectivity, which is actually here in healthcare now. If you're coming up with a new product or service, you have to consider how you're going to be relevant from a mobile and connected perspective. And that, I think, theme has carried through of today. So that's here. We're in the process now of scaling that with the number of solutions, but it's no longer a question of if mobility and connectivity plays out in healthcare. It's just when and how.
So let's talk about that. You've had a unique seat in the evolution in this ecosystem. What are the critical issues we're looking at right now?
Well, there's two really key issues now at this point. One is, can we validate what's been done? Can we actually show positive clinical outcomes? But even equally important, can we show that they actually bring convenience to the physicians that use them, nurses that use them, and the patients that use them? And the patients that use them is actually a very key point. We're moving into a much more consumer-oriented, consumer-focused delivery of healthcare, and so bringing convenience and benefits to the patients along with the clinical outcome is becoming important. And then finally, economic efficiency. Is it cheaper for the health system? Is it cheaper for the doctors? Is it cheaper for the healthcare facilities? And is it cheaper for the consumer and their families?
So there may be some instability in the ecosystem in terms of business models and such. What do you see as some of the best practices out there to date?
Well, right now, a very important best practice is actually doing the clinical validation, doing the clinical trials to actually show that you're getting the clinical efficacy. A new best practice is adding to that the economic efficacy. In other words, doing an economic study at the same time you're doing the clinical study. Historically, those economic studies were only done from a payer's perspective. In other words, does it save the payer money? We should now look at it, does it save the patient money? Does it save the patient's family money? Does it save the healthcare facility money? Does it save the doctor money? These are all parts that touch on all these products. So that's the efficiency side. On the clinical side, does it make a difference? Is it better than the alternatives? So this is about being better, faster, cheaper now, and that's where we are in our healthcare delivery system. We've got to be better, faster, cheaper.
Let's talk about WLSA and its member organizations. What role do they have playing into that?
Well, WLSA is a unique group. It's a trade group and an organization of clinical providers, medical device companies, pharmaceutical companies, and really all the actors that are involved in applying wireless technologies into healthcare and the life sciences space. The role it plays, though, is not so much as a trade show as it is an advancement of interesting ideas, putting examples out on the table of where successes are occurring, and actually creating a network of folks that interact and partner with each other. You know, interestingly enough, building wireless health services is about partnering, and it's no longer about kind of building it all on your own. You know, the telco system and building airplanes is not done by one company. It's done by a whole collaboration of companies. The same thing happens when you add telecommunications infrastructure to healthcare. You now have partners. And so a big emphasis here is about bringing partners together, potential partners and new partners in. And right now, the pharma industry is a great example. They are really reaching out and starting to partner in this area.
Excellent. So are the laggards the delivery systems, and what role might Scripps Translational Science Institute play in bringing them along?
Well, the mission of the Scripps Translational Science Institute is twofold. One is to do research in genomics and wireless digital health, and the other is to train clinicians, physicians, in doing clinical research. Clinical research is important to convince the medical community that they should adopt and change as new technologies come along, prove that it works clinically and that it's better for the patients. So that's a very important part. And the training programs obviously help out there. But more importantly, and for broad dissemination, is the clinical trials that are being done there to actually show these technologies applied into healthcare actually work. And that's when you can be game changing. We just had a study that came out about 2 months ago showing the efficacy of a small wireless patch called the Zeo patch by a company called iRhythm. And we compared it to a gold standard called the Holter monitor, which has been around for decades. And we looked at a Holter monitor versus the patch. The Holter monitor requires you to be outfitted with this monitor by a technician. Usually you got to go make a special appointment. You spend an hour getting outfitted. 24 hours later you got to get unwound from that process. And the doctor eventually gets a report. It's a lot of manual, a lot of people touching it, a lot of appointment making going on. The Zeo patch just has the doctor handing you a little box with a patch in it. Says peel off the sticky stuff, slap it on your chest. In 7 days, put it back in the box, drop it in the mail. I'll get the report electronically on the internet. Very much simpler process, much less expensive. Clinically, what we showed, it was 60% more efficacious at collecting clinically significant dysrhythmias in the patients. So clinical outcomes are better, caught more clinically significant instances, less expensive, far more convenient. Patients reported much higher level of comfort wearing the device compared to the traditional Holter monitor. And when that report was released, Francis Collins, the director of the NIH, blogged about it, and Aetna stepped up and changed their reimbursement policy and said, we're going to cover it.
A couple of trophy names in the innovation impulse there. So in this ecosystem, where do you see the spark of innovation, and where do you see maybe where they might need a kick in the pants?
Well, I think we're starting to see pharma step up to the plate in a big way. They're becoming very innovative in combining electronics with drugs. For example, new drug delivery systems that might be in the form of a patch or a syringe that's connected, that's collecting physiological information, helping you keep track of and reminding you to take the drug, or in some cases actually validating that what's happening with you with the drug on board is actually having a positive impact. So pharma is really starting to move in this space. I think the healthcare provider networks are still lagging in terms of figuring out how they're going to take advantage of the technologies in order to help improve their workflow, their clinical outcomes, how they're going to manage the risks that they're being asked to take as new payment models come in. And they're the ones that are probably the next ones to have to come to the plate and figure out what to do.
Is it business model, financing paradigm, or just general resistance to change?
All of the above. A little bit of all the above. There's certainly early adopters among some of the systems. There's frankly lots of different reasons for adopting wireless technology. Some help improve workflow. Some help save costs. Some help get you more patients. Some are new devices or services that you're going to prescribe or order. So there's a little bit of there's so many different uses that there's a little bit of perhaps confusion around, where should we start, what should we begin with. But those institutions that are beginning to take on risk are starting to ask those questions. How do we use technology? How do we use tools? How do we use technology-enabled services, new capabilities to help manage that risk, deliver a better experience for the patient and their family, help lower all of our collective costs in this equation? And those are the ones that are stepping up. So as we move from a fee-for-service model into models where the medical groups and the hospitals are actually sharing risk with the payers, that's when they're going to move.
So prime partner candidates ought to be emerging ACOs, integrated delivery systems?
Absolutely. Anybody where the risk has been transferred to. In Southern California, we have plenty of medical groups and hospital groups that have risks, so there's plenty of examples here. But ACOs around the country are certainly another example, and certainly the health plans themselves.
So just talk to the attorney from Epstein Becker on the Congress and FDA oversight. Do you have a take on that?
Well, I think the FDA has been moving along, actually. I'm not at all depressed or in any way negatively impacted from the FDA's position. I think they're doing their job, and I think the companies that are embracing that they need to go through an FDA process are actually getting through that process. I think at the end of the day, we need that level of both confidence and safety check in the system. So I think it's moving. It's frustrating. It's certainly frustrating if you're a Silicon Valley software company and all of a sudden you got this new regulatory entity to deal with that you've never dealt with before. But I think we've got plenty of companies that have made their way through.
Talk a bit about the scope of clinical trials.
Digital health can be dealt with in clinical trials in a number of ways, but the normal usual suspects are medical device companies, pharmaceutical companies, and payers that want to do studies to either validate technologies, do comparative efficacy studies between technologies and services, and products, or they're doing regulatory trials for submission to the FDA or to the European or other regulatory bodies. That's kind of the bread and butter of the space. What's interesting now is we're starting to get interest from consumer electronic companies, the folks that make handsets, phones, cell phones, telcos, and even international food companies that want to do clinical trials for their products. Because they want to be able to make claims in the marketplace about their products. You may have a food that's or a hydration product, and they want to that's being used by, say, athletes, and that's helping to improve performance, and they want to be able to make claims about that. You may have a consumer electronics company that's adding wellness or fitness or even healthcare functionality into their phone or tablet products. And so we're having a whole new category of folks starting to think about how to use clinical trials to prove out the efficacy and benefits of their products.
And you having fun?
I'm having a great time. This is a great time in the space. I think, as I said, my last 11 years have been focused on getting people to adopt wireless technologies into healthcare. I think that box has been checked. I think we're now moving on to let's prove them out. Let's show the savings and examples. Let's show the convenience, and let's start scaling this. Let's start getting network effect.
There you have it. The box has been checked, and now it's about network effect. So, Don, looking forward, what do you see for WLSA's future?
You know, WLSA has got a really interesting future. We're starting to help other conferences bring digital health into those conferences. So we've done long-term arrangements as a group with the Cellular Telephone Industry Association, CTIA, and with BIO to actually bring the content, bring the evolution of digital health into their meetings. And so I think we're going to see essentially what's happening here is the digital transformation of these industries is obviously well started, and what's going to happen is 5-10 years from now, people are going to say, why was there ever a wireless health organization? Because it's just normal, it's just incorporated, and that's our goal. At the end of the day, we may put ourselves out of business because everybody will just be using wireless technologies.